If I may, I'd like to start with a question. Well, of course, I'm going to start with a question because you're not here to stop me, so too bad. Anyway, have you ever stopped to consider how your actions today will affect your life tomorrow? Has it ever has it ever occurred to you that the things you do today may come back for your good or for your harm in the days or the years ahead? It's something to think about as we're taking a look at dependability. I want to examine the life of Timothy as we wind up this week's study on dependability. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to examine that question as well as we're looking at dependability here on Transforming the World. I appreciate you spending time with me. My name is Pastor Greg. So let me reflect a story to you. Back in 1989, my wife and I, we started the process of buying our very first home. 1989, it was 11 years after I had graduated high school. 11 years. And the house that we were touring, we were there, and I happened to notice a picture there on the mantle there by the fireplace. But it was definitely someone that I had graduated with from high school. I knew Carl. So back at that particular time, the owners of the house were still there. They didn't run off and leave. This was in '89. I guess things were different back then. But as we were leaving, I just kind of casually made the comment, as I saw a picture in there. Would that happen to be Carl? And they said, yeah, sure, that's our son-in-law. I'm like, oh, interesting. I said, I know Carl. I went to high school with Carl. Well, unbeknownst to me, these homeowners then called Carl, and they asked him, they said, Carl, do you remember Greg Jones from high school? You know, Carl, I don't know what Carl said, but it must have been very positive, because these homeowners then decided to sell the home to us instead of another individual, another family who had tried to buy the house. They had offered full price. We were actually below the list, but they took our offer over the other one, all because of what Carl had said about me. To this day, I have no idea what he said, but it was obviously very positive. I have no idea what I did back when we were in school to warrant such a positive report from Carl. I must have done something right in high school. I don't think I did very much right, but it must have been one of those things where my reputation, the reputation that I established in high school came back into play 11 years later, and it was to my advantage. I don't know what I communicated, because as I reflect on my life in high school, I wasn't a very stellar individual, but Carl must have thought I was a good fellow. I want to tell you a story today about a guy by the name of Timothy. As we start thinking about our actions today and how they affect our life tomorrow, well, there's a great example. The example comes from this guy, Timothy. Now, the Apostle Paul is writing a letter to the church in Philippi. He's in prison. And while he's in prison, he writes these letters to a lot of the churches that he had helped plant in and around the Roman Empire, in and around the Mediterranean area there. And Philippians 2:19, Paul writes this. He says, if the Lord is willing, I hope to send Timothy to you soon for a visit. And then he can cheer me up by telling me how you are getting along. Listen to what he says about Timothy. He says, I have no one else like Timothy who genuinely cares about your welfare. All the others care only for themselves and not for what matters to Jesus Christ. Verse 22, but you know how Timothy has proved himself. Like a son with his father, he has served with me in preaching the good news. I hope to send him to you just as soon as I find out what's going to happen to me here. Timothy has proved himself like a son with his father. He has served me in preaching the good news. In a very crucial moment in Paul's life, when Paul was concerned about the affairs of the faithful in the churches that he had helped start throughout his missionary journeys, Timothy proved himself. His actions in the past demonstrated that Timothy was a man of dependability and he was trustworthy. His actions, his dependability and his truthfulness and trustworthiness were the reputations that preceded him. And Paul says, look, there's nobody else like this guy. I believe because of what he has done in the past. And Paul gives Timothy this stellar commendation because of what Timothy had done prior or previous in his life. It kind of reflects back to what I was saying about this first house that we bought. I had no idea how my actions in high school would come back to come into play 11 years later when I was purchasing a house. God did, I didn't. And I think the question you and I need to be asking ourselves, this is a very, very important question we should be asking ourselves. How will our actions today come into play in our lives next year, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? We simply have no idea the impact that our actions today will have in our tomorrows. If we did know, if you and I did know how our actions today would affect our life tomorrow, well, then we would be sure to do what is good, what is noble, what is right, what is dependable and trustworthy. We would do these things if we knew that it would be to our benefit several years later. The problem is we don't know, do we? We have no clue what tomorrow will bring in our life. We have no idea what sort of reputation will precede us, if you will. Which means that we should be living each and every day today as an opportunity to make a positive, Christ-like, God-like impact on those around us. In this particular instance, dependability and trustworthiness. We should be living and conducting our lives every moment today as a dependable and trustworthy person, because we simply have no idea how that will come into play years from now. If the world, just like Boaz, if the world recognizes you as a dependable and trustworthy person because of your actions today, that reputation will precede you. I can't stress this enough, my friend. It is to our benefit to be as dependable and trustworthy today as we possibly can. I could go on and tell you another instance that happened in my life where my reputation was actually somebody actually used my reputation in my defense. Back before I was in pastoral ministry, a coworker made an accusation against me, and the supervisor, our mutual supervisor, rejected the accusation because he said, my supervisor said, that is not Greg's character. So I didn't even have to defend myself. My character was defensive enough in the eyes of that boss. I was dumbfounded. I had no clue that my character, my conduct, my dependability, trustworthiness, the way I conducted myself as a person yesterday, how it would come into play today. We must be very conscientious in all that we do today, because it will have an impact in our lives tomorrow. You can almost count on it. That a day will come tomorrow, 5 years, 11 years from now, where the things that you do today, your dependability, your trustworthiness today, will actually become something of a benefit in your life 10 or 11 years from now. Live every moment. My friend, live every moment that you can with all of these characteristics of Christ-likeness. But specifically, as we're talking about dependability and trustworthiness, be as dependable and trustworthy as you possibly can today, because it will be to your benefit tomorrow. You can count on that. So we've taken a look at dependability all this week on Transforming the World. I am so glad you were able to join me. Let's see, what's next week's topic? Let's jump ahead and see what we're going to be looking at next week. That's always interesting, right? We're going to take a look at gratitude. I'm so thankful they included that in here. Sorry. Okay, join me next week as we take a look at the Christian characteristic of gratitude on Transforming the World. Thanks again for joining me. My name is Pastor Greg.